This is my 14th video in my Color and Light series where I'll show you how to draw dramatic and realistic sunbeams. Remember my book, Ellen's Guide to Color, Light, and Shading on Amazon, where the Kindle is only $5. To see sunbeams, we need four things. We need direct light, where we know where the sun is in the direction of the light. We need stuff in the air, like moisture, dust, or smoke, to scatter the light. We need a dark background, like this dark room or dark clouds. And we need perforations in that background, like the window here or openings in clouds and foliage. The reason sunbeams seem to widen as they move away from the sun is due to light scattering. With no scattering, we get a spotlight effect. However, when the light bounces from one air particle to another, more of the atmosphere receives light, making the sunbeam larger and wider with softer edges. Since the intensity of the light weakens as it moves away from the sun, we see more and more of the background. Sunbeams are cones of light. At sunset, these cones are nearly horizontal, whereas at noon, they're more vertical. Here's me looking at the cone at sunset, so my line of sight here is nearly parallel to the axis of the cone. As a result, the sunbeams appear to radiate out because I'm looking at the sun, and the cone of light is large because we see a larger cross-section of it, and because it goes through more atmosphere, so it scatters light. At noon, in contrast, our line of sight is perpendicular to the axis of the cone, so we see less of the cone, and the sunbeams appear to be more parallel. In this first image, we're looking at the sun, so the sun rays radiate out, and the cone of light appears to be quite large. This is the way most artists show sunbeams. When we don't look at the sun, the cone of light is smaller, and the sunbeams appear more parallel. It provides a pattern of diagonal lines that usually need to be countered by vertical lines like these trees. Some of the trees, like this one, is in front of the sunbeams, while others rapidly fade away with distance. I'll show you how to use this structure to emphasize the focus, to show depth, and to use it as a design element. Sunbeams clearly show the position of the sun and the direction of the light. Areas hit by the sun have bright saturated colors. Areas in front of the light become silhouettes where we see the shape of the foliage but little color, and areas behind the light are obscured. So this adds a lot of variety to your painting and ways to highlight your focal point. How many sunbeams should you include in your painting? You could show all of them, but I think that's not very interesting. You could have a spotlight effect where the sunbeam shines down on your focus, but I think that's too heavy-handed. A nice compromise, preferred by most artists, is to show some rays, especially with the lost and found look, like these rays seen intermittently among the trees. Sunbeams can enhance the feeling of depth, making the end of these tracks seem very far away. This image in particular shows depth because we see strong value contrasts in the foreground that makes it come forward, and a softening of edges and blurring in the distance, making that look further away. But many light rays can obscure the background, reducing the sense of depth. Sunbeams attract attention, so they're usually the focus or point to the focus. In this first one, a single sunbeam lighting the focus has no subtlety to it. We look at the white spot, we look at the tree, and we ignore the rest of the painting. In the second one, the obvious sunbeam causes this spot, but the spot isn't very interesting, and if we put a small boat there, again, spotlighting the focus would be heavy-handed. This image is much better. We see the sun and the sunbeams forming a continuous pattern that's interesting and varied. But if you see the sun, as you do over here, it becomes the focus, just this white spot, and you miss the rest of the painting. So it's better to partially hide the sun as they did here. I consider these two paintings on top to be successful compositions. In the first one, the sunbeam lights the end of the pier, which is the focus. And in the second, it lights up the boats, but not in a heavy-handed way. This composition, however, is poor. We see this white vertical line, which isn't very interesting, and it's so bright that it's hard to move away from it. At least have most of the sun hidden and break up this line with a boat. This first composition is poor. We don't want the eye path to run through the middle of the painting because the viewer just zips through the image without any interesting side trips. Both the tracks and the light converge toward the same vanishing point, which is overkill. And then there's nothing to see when you get at the vanishing point, like an oncoming train. So the viewer rushes to the vanishing point only to be disappointed to see a yellow sun. The second one is also a poor composition because it's too busy. Both the sky and the land attract our attention. So pick one of them to be dominant and downplay the other. Sunbeams add rhythm and patterns like their diagonal directions here, counting the many vertical lines. Since they attract attention, if the sunbeams are on one side of the image, they should be balanced by something else on the other side, like these massive trees. This is a beautiful photo, inviting us into the distance. If I were to paint this, I would move this tree to the left and still have its shadow inviting us in this direction, and maybe put a little figure in the background around here. The light shade patterns on the ground should agree with the sunbeams. This white reflection has no relationship with the sky. This second image is much more interesting and realistic, where the blue clouds are reflected by the water. Here are some examples of what not to do when painting sunbeams. In the first one, we look at this bright spot and it almost blinds us because it's surrounded by dark values. It reminds us of the unpleasant glare we feel when we look at the sun, so the picture is hard to look at, and that's not a message you want to send to your viewers. In the second one, the sunbeams seem to be coming from the crook in the tree rather than from the sky. And for a realistic image over here, you don't want multiple spots of light as bright as the sun. And in this image, dark lines are passing through the image. The sun is only spreading light rays, not dark rays. We see the dark parts of the background because they aren't altered by the sunbeams. Sunbeams are often associated with diffraction, or the bending of light. These light rays, rather than being blocked by the tree, bend around it, so this area appears light against the dark tree. Adding diffraction to your painting, like whitening this part of the tree, greatly increases the apparent intensity of the light. Sunbeams must be straight, so use your arm rather than your wrist when you form these lines. They should come from the lightest part of the sky. They should appear translucent, so we see underlying elements. One way to do this is to take some light blue paint and start near the light and then drag it along so that the paint gradually dissipates as you go along the sunbeam, letting the background show through. The thickness and values of these sunbeams should vary. My next video will be about dappled light, and please remember to subscribe.